The marble was so white it looked unused. The lights were the soft gold that rich men buy when they want a room to look honest. Keoma Jin stood alone in front of the long mirror, and the only sound in the world was the slow tap of one diamond earring against the cold counter as she set it down. She did not look at her face first. She looked at her left hand. The wedding ring had been on that finger for 25 years. It had survived 2 pregnancies, 1 fire, 12 winters of silence, and 1 husband who had stopped saying her name in 2014. Tonight the ring was going to come off, not in anger, not in tears. The way a surgeon removes a stitch that has done its job. She turned her hand slowly. The diamond caught the gold light and threw it across the marble like a small knife. She smiled. Not a happy smile, not a sad smile, but the small, private smile of a woman who has been counting something for a very long time and has finally reached the last number. From her clutch, she took out a tube of lipstick. Red. Matte. Expensive enough that nobody at the gala downstairs would notice it was hollow. She unscrewed the bottom. The ring slid off her finger without resistance, as if it had been waiting. She placed it inside the tube, screwed the bottom shut, and put the lipstick back in her clutch the way another woman might put away a receipt. Then she took out a second phone, not the gold one her husband had given her, not the one his men checked every Sunday. A small, cheap black phone with a cracked screen and a sticker on the back that said, in tiny Yoruba letters, her mother had taught her to read at 6 years old, Omo mi, my child. She pressed record. 9 seconds. That was all she had planned. 9 seconds before the cameras outside the bathroom door would notice she had been inside too long. She looked into the lens, and her voice came out steady, low, almost kind. "If you're watching this," she said, "the anniversary has already started, and I am not the one who's going to bleed tonight." She stopped recording. She sent the video to one number. The number had no name saved against it, only a single symbol. A small black bird with long legs. A crane. She put the phone back. She fixed her lipstick with the empty tube. She adjusted the gold pin on her shoulder. A small wooden crane. The only piece of jewelry her grandmother had given her on her wedding day, 25 years ago in a village outside Enugu. The pin was scratched. It had survived more than the diamond. She breathed in once. She breathed out once. Then Keoma Jin opened the bathroom door and walked back toward the ballroom where her husband was about to call her worthless in front of 600 people. She was smiling. In the corridor, a young waiter bowed too low. He had been told the African Mrs. Jin was sad tonight. He had been told to be gentle with her. He looked up, expecting tears, and saw instead a woman who looked like she was walking to her own coronation. He froze for half a second. She passed him without a word, and the gold light moved with her down the corridor, and somewhere far below in the basement of the Jin Tower, a server room belonging to a Lagos Seoul fintech called Adeyemi Holdings, lit up green. Every share, every contract, every signature all ready. The clock above the ballroom doors read 8:51 p.m. In 9 minutes, her husband would raise a glass. In 53 minutes, he would lose everything he had ever stolen from her. And he still did not know her sons were alive. The ballroom of the Jin Tower had been built for moments like this, ceilings so high the chandeliers looked like small frozen galaxies, a marble floor polished to mirror, 600 guests in black and silver, holding glasses of champagne that cost more than a year of school fees in the village where Keoma was born. The orchestra was playing something soft in Korean, a song her husband loved, a song that had nothing of her in it. She walked in alone, heads turned. Some turned slowly, the way rich heads turn when they want to pretend they are not staring. Some turned fast, hungry, the wives of his business partners, the mistresses of his business partners, the journalists he had paid to come, all of them looking at the black woman in the cream gold dress, the African wife who had survived 25 years inside a Korean Chaebol family that had never once treated her like a wife. She did not look back at any of them. She looked for one face only. Han Mi-rae was standing near the central table, exactly where Keoma had known she would be standing. The mistress, 28 years old, daughter of the Han Hotel chain. Long, pale neck, red dress, hair like black water. She was laughing at something Jin Tae-hyun had said, and her hand was resting on his arm the way a hand rests on something it owns. Tae-hyun saw Keoma, and his face did not change. That was the thing about him. His face had not changed in 12 years. Not when the doctor told her both babies had died in the hospital fire. Not when she had screamed his name in the burn unit corridor. Not when she had stopped speaking for 4 months afterward and lost 18 kilos. His face had stayed the same chiseled mask his mother had taught him to wear before he was old enough to choose. He raised his glass slightly toward her. A small, mocking salute. She walked to her seat at the head table. Number 1, the place of the wife. The chair had been moved. Someone had moved it. It was now 6 inches further from his than it had been at the last gala. 6 inches. Anyone who did not know the family would not have noticed. Everyone who knew the family had already noticed. Mi-rae was sitting in a chair that had been added between them. Keoma sat down without comment. A waiter brought her water. She nodded. She did not touch the glass. Across the room, near the orchestra, a tall, thin man in a dark suit was pretending to check his cufflinks. He was not checking his cufflinks. He was looking at her. He had eyes the exact shape of her father's, and a small scar above his left eyebrow from a fall at age 4 that she had never been there to kiss better. He did not smile. He gave her the smallest nod a son can give a mother in a room full of people who think she has no sons. Kale. She did not nod back. She had practiced not nodding back for 3 years. Somewhere behind her, near the service entrance, his brother was speaking very softly to the head of the catering staff in Korean, so polite it sounded like a knife wrapped in silk. Kyan always handled the staff. Kale handled the numbers. They had divided the world between them before they ever knew she was their mother. Tae-hyun stood. The orchestra stopped mid-bar. The room fell quiet so fast that Keoma heard her own heartbeat for the first time all evening. Steady, slow, unafraid. He lifted his glass. "Friends," he began, in the deep voice that television loved. 25 years ago, I made a decision that shaped everything I have built. He paused for the small, expected laughter. He got it. Keoma folded her hands in her lap. The wooden crane on her shoulder caught the light. She waited for him to call her worthless. She had been waiting for 25 years. 25 years ago, Tae-hyun said, swirling his champagne, I married a woman from very far away. A photographer. A girl with a cheap camera and no surname that mattered. The laughter started again. Small, polite. The kind of laughter that wealthy people use as a weapon because they know it cannot be called a weapon. Kioma did not move. The crane on her shoulder did not move. The water in her glass did not move. I married her, he continued, because my father had just died, and the Jin family needed a story of compassion, a photograph for the magazines, the Korean tycoon and his beautiful African bride. It worked. The shares went up 4% that week. Some of you here remember those numbers. A few old men at the back raised their glasses to him. They remembered. For 25 years, he said, she has stood beside me in photographs. She has nodded at the right moments. She has worn the dresses my mother chose. She has been, in every way that mattered to the press, the perfect decoration. He looked at her now, directly, for the first time all night. Tonight, he said softly, I want to thank her, publicly, for her long and quiet service to this family. He smiled. And I want to introduce you all to the woman who will, from this evening, be standing in the photograph beside me. He turned slightly. Han Mireille, the future Mrs. Jin, the real one. The room did something it had not done in 25 years of Jin family galas. It went completely still. 600 people, and not one of them moved. Not because they were shocked, because they had all known. Every wife in the room had known for 4 years. Every business partner had known for 2. The only person in the room who had not been told, in the polite official way these things are told, was the woman the announcement was being made about. Mireille stood up slowly, as if she had been waiting for her cue in a play she had rehearsed many times. She smiled at the room. She inclined her head toward Kioma, a small, graceful nod that contained more cruelty than any slap. Kioma, Taehyun said, and his voice softened into the tone men use when they are pretending to be kind in public. You have been a good decoration, but the family needs a wife now, a Korean wife, a woman who can carry the name. You understand. You always did. He raised his glass higher. To the worthless years, he said, and to the worthy years that begin tonight. The room did not laugh this time. The room held its breath. 600 people waited for the African woman to break. She did not break. She lifted her water glass. Not the champagne. The water. She lifted it slowly, the way a queen might lift something she has been handed by mistake. She looked at her husband over the rim. Her face was calm. Her mouth was almost smiling. To the worthy years, she said, in her low, clear voice. Yes, let us drink to them. And she drank. The room exhaled in confusion. They had expected tears. They had been promised a scene. The journalists at the back lowered their phones in disappointment. Kioma set the glass down. May I make one small request? She said, looking only at Taehyun. For the music. A song my grandmother used to sing. It would mean a great deal to me. On this last night, I stand here as your wife. He smiled. He could afford to be generous now. He had won the room. Of course, he said, anything. What is the song? It is called Cranes Don't Mourn Twice, she said. The orchestra has the sheet music. I gave it to them last week. He laughed lightly. I have never heard of it. No, she said, you wouldn't have. She nodded at the conductor. The conductor lifted his baton. And somewhere in Incheon, the lights of a port warehouse owned by Black Crane went dark for the first time in 19 years. The first thing she remembered was the smell. Not smoke, bleach. They had cleaned the maternity floor so hard before they let her back in that the air burned her throat worse than the fire had. White corridors, white nurses, white silence. And at the end of the corridor, 2 small white sheets on 2 small white tables, and a man in a white coat who would not meet her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Jin. The fire reached the nursery before we could reach the infants. There was nothing." She had not heard the rest. She had heard her own voice instead, far away, asking the same question over and over in a language nobody in the room spoke. "Omo mi, omo mi, omo mi. My children, my children, my children." She had been 29 years old. She had carried those boys for 8.5 months inside a body that had been told by 3 Korean doctors it could not carry 1 child, let alone 2. She had named them in the 7th month. Chaebol for her father, and Kayin, the Yoruba name that means celebrated child. She had whispered those names to her belly every morning while the Seoul winter pressed against the hospital windows. They had let her hold them once, just once, the night they were born. 2 small bodies, wrapped in green hospital blankets. 2 small heads of soft black hair. Kayin had a birthmark on his left shoulder shaped like a small star. Chaebol did not. She had counted their fingers. She had counted their toes. She had memorized them the way a soldier memorizes a map before crossing a border. The fire started 41 hours later. That was what the report said. 41 hours. Electrical fault in the wall of the premature ward. 2 infants did not survive. The Jin family released a statement of grief. The Jin Group share price dipped 0.5% and recovered by Thursday. Tae-hyun came to her hospital room 2 days later. He did not sit on the bed. He stood by the window with his hands behind his back, the way his father used to stand. "You should have allowed the protection detail in the maternity ward," he said quietly. I told you 3 times. You said you wanted privacy. You said you wanted your sons to be born without men in suits standing in the corner. This is the cost of your African pride." She had tried to speak, her throat had closed. "My mother is arranging the small funeral," he had said. "Private, no press, you will wear black. You will not cry where anyone can see you. You will not speak to anyone outside the family for 30 days. Do you understand?" It was not a question. She had understood. She had worn black for 146 days. She had not spoken to her own mother in Lagos for 9 months because she could not say the words, "They are dead," out loud in any language. She had lost so much weight that the family doctor, a quiet old man named Dr. Pak, who had known the Jin household for 40 years, came to her once and held her wrist in his hand and said nothing for a long time. That was the year she stopped being a photographer. That was the year she stopped being a wife in any way that mattered. That was the year Tae-hyun moved into the east wing of the house and stopped speaking to her at breakfast. Mireille was 19 then, a first-year student at Yonsei. Kyoma did not know her yet. She would not know her for another 4 years when she found the first photograph of the 2 of them in a magazine her driver had forgotten on the back seat. By then, Kyoma had already begun to suspect that something about the fire had been a lie. The first crack came from Dr. Pak. He died in 2017, a heart attack at 73. His daughter called the Jin household to invite Mrs. Jin to the funeral because, she said softly into the phone, "My father told me before he died that he had something he needed to give Mrs. Jin in person, and now I must give it to her instead. Kyoma went. The daughter handed her a small brown envelope. Inside the envelope was a single page from a hospital ledger, dated 41 hours after Kale and Kine were born. 2 lines. Twin male infants, Jin family. Transferred 314 to private vehicle. Status: live. Destination: Busan. Aunt Jin Haisu residence. Lev. Kyoma sat in her car for 2 hours in the funeral home parking lot and did not move. That night, for the first time in 5 years, she ate a full meal. She did not confront him. That was the first decision she made, and it was the decision that saved her life. For 5 days after the funeral, she sat in her bedroom with the ledger page under her pillow, and she planned. She did not cry. She did not pray for revenge. She thought about her grandmother in Enugu, the small, fierce woman who had given her the wooden crane on her wedding day and had said, "Granddaughter, when a man takes your nest, do not scream. Build another nest higher than his, where he cannot see it. Then take back your eggs one by one in the dark." She had been 8 years old. She had not understood. She understood now. She wrote one letter. Not to Taehyun, not to the police, not to a lawyer. To a man in Lagos she had not spoken to in 26 years. Her cousin Amika, who had moved to London and then to Hong Kong and had built, very quietly, a small fintech that the British papers called promising and the Chinese papers called dangerous. The letter was 3 lines. Amika. I need a company I needed in my mother's maiden name. I needed to be able to buy shares in Korea without anyone seeing my face. I will explain when I see you. Kyoma, he answered in 4 days. Cousin, the company exists. It is called Adeyemi Holdings. The first board meeting is next month in Singapore. Tell me when you can fly. E. She flew on a Tuesday under the name on her old Nigerian passport, the name she had stopped using when she married. She wore no jewelry. She sat in economy. Nobody in the Jin household noticed she was gone for 48 hours because nobody in the Jin household had noticed her for years. In Singapore, she signed papers for 6 hours. By the end of the day, a woman called Mrs. Chioma Adeyemi Okafor was the sole shareholder of a fintech, with offices in Lagos, Singapore, and a small unmarked floor in the Yoido financial district of Seoul. The board listed one director only, a Korean-Nigerian man named K. Adeyemi, age 21, who did not exist yet. She had created him on paper that morning. The K stood for Chaebol. She did not know yet whether her sons were alive. She had a ledger page. She had a name. She had an address in Busan that might already be empty. She had no proof her boys were not dead in a different way. Sold, lost, hidden. Behind so many lies, she would never reach them. But she had a company. And a company, her grandmother had once said, is a nest you can build in the dark. For the next 2 years, she did 2 things at once. The first thing was to find them. She hired a single investigator, not a Korean, not a Nigerian, a retired French police inspector who lived in Da Nang and worked only 6 cases a year. He charged her 100,000 euros and asked no questions. She paid him from a Singapore account Taehyun could not see. He took 11 months. In month 12, he sent her a photograph. 2 young men, identical, standing on the steps of a Catholic boarding school in the mountains outside Busan. One had a small scar above his left eyebrow from falling at age 4. The other was laughing, and on his exposed left shoulder there was a small birthmark shaped like a star. She held the photograph for 9 hours without moving. Then she put it in a fireproof box inside a hotel safe in Singapore, and she did not look at it again for 3 years because she knew that if she looked at it again, she would get on a plane and ruin everything. The second thing was to buy, slowly, quietly. Through 14 different shell companies routed through Lagos, Mauritius, Dublin, and Vancouver, Adeyemi Holdings began buying shares of Gin Group in 2019, 0.5% here, 1% there, always under the threshold that required public disclosure, always through different brokers, always paid for by a company Tycoons lawyers had never heard of. By 2022, Adeyemi Holdings owned 14% of Gin Group. By 2024, 31%. By the night of the anniversary gala, the number on the screen of the Uedo office, the number that flashed green at 8:51 p.m., exactly when Kioma was walking out of the marble bathroom, was 51.3%. The Gin Group, the Chaebol her husband had inherited from his father and called his blood and his bones, was now owned by his African wife. He did not know. He would not know for 47 more minutes. She had not gone looking for her sons. That was the second decision that saved her life, and theirs. The retired French inspector had warned her, in the only sentence of advice he gave in 11 months of work. Madame, if you go to them, the father will know within a week. If they come to you, he will never know until it is too late. The choice is yours, but only one of these endings has all 3 of you alive at the end of it. So she had waited. She had waited for them to find her. It happened in October 2023, a Tuesday. She was sitting in a small Italian restaurant in Cheongdam-dong that she went to alone every second Tuesday of the month. The same routine for 9 years. The kind of small habit a watched wife builds, because predictability is a form of camouflage. A young man sat down at the table across from hers. He was not Korean, not fully. He had her father's eyes, the long, narrow shape, the heavy lower lid. He had Taehyun's jaw. He was 22 years old and he was wearing a gray suit that did not quite fit him because he had bought it that morning, specifically for this meeting. He did not introduce himself. He placed a single object on the table between them, a small wooden crane, identical to the one she had been wearing on her shoulder for 25 years. Slightly smaller, slightly newer. My aunt in Busan carved this for me when I was 14, he said quietly, in English. She said it was a copy of one her sister-in-law's mother had carved a long time ago. She said the original belonged to a woman she was not allowed to talk about. Kioma did not move. Her hand stayed flat on the table. Her face stayed exactly the same. Inside, every cell in her body was screaming. "Are you afraid?" the young man asked. "No," she said. "Should I be?" "No." He nodded once. He pushed the crane an inch closer to her. "My brother is outside in the car," he said. "He didn't want to come in until we were sure. My name is Kale. His name is Kyan. We have known for 6 years. We were going to tell you. We were waiting for the right moment." She looked at him for a long time. "What changed?" she said. "I started working in finance," he said. "I started noticing a company, Adeyemi Holdings, the patterns, the trades, the way it was buying Gin Group, shares the way a person buys a coffin, quietly in pieces, knowing exactly what it is for." He paused. "And then I noticed that one of the shell companies behind Adeyemi was registered to a woman with my mother's maiden name, the maiden name of the woman my father told me died in childbirth. The woman my aunt told me, when I was 16 and drunk for the first time, did not die at all. He looked at her. "Mother," he said, "I think we have the same project." She did not cry. She would not let herself cry in public for a son she had been told was ash for 12 years. She lifted her water glass. "Tell your brother to come in," she said. "Order him the pasta. He is too thin." That was the beginning. For 2 years, they worked together in absolute silence. Chaebol took over Adeyemi Holdings as its public face. Adeyemi finally became a real person, a tall, thin Korean Nigerian with her father's eyes who began appearing in the financial papers as a rising young chairman. Kyan took over something else, the thing she had not planned for, the thing she had not even known to plan for. Kyan had spent the last 4 years building a small shipping operation out of Incheon Port. It was called the Tide. It had begun as a legitimate logistics company and had grown very quickly into something that the older syndicates of Seoul whispered about with a mixture of fear and rage. Kyan had not become a businessman. Kyan had become his father's competition. By the night of the gala, the Tide owned 3 of the 5 warehouses that Tycoons' organization, the Black Crane, had used for 2 decades to move money and goods through the port. Kyan had bought them through intermediaries. His own father had signed the papers without knowing he was selling to his own son. When Kioma had first learned this, sitting in the same Italian restaurant 6 months before the gala, listening to Kyan explain in soft Korean while Kyle translated in soft English, she had set down her fork and laughed for the first time in 12 years. She had laughed for 41 seconds. Then she had wiped her eyes with a napkin, and she had said, in the steady voice that had not raised once in 25 years of marriage, "Boys, plan a party for me, the 25th wedding anniversary. Make sure your father invites everyone he loves. We are going to give him a night he will tell his lawyers about for the rest of his life." The orchestra began to play. The first 6 notes were Korean, a traditional melody, sad and slow, the kind of melody that made the older guests close their eyes. Taehyun smiled. He had not heard the song before, but it sounded respectful. He sipped his champagne. Mireille touched his arm. The 7th note was not Korean. It was a low drum, a Yoruba Gangan talking drum, played softly, almost under the strings. The drummers had been hidden behind a screen. 3 of them. They had been flown in from Lagos 2 days earlier and rehearsed in a hotel basement in Itaewon under a false name. The melody shifted. It did not shift in a way that was rude. It shifted in a way that was older. The Korean strings began to weave around the African drum the way 2 rivers meet at a delta, neither one giving way, both becoming something new. The Yoruba words of the song were not sung. They were only suggested by the rise and fall of the drum. But anyone in the room who had ever stood in a village in southeast Nigeria at sunset would have recognized them. The crane does not mourn twice. She mourns once for the egg that was broken. Then she builds her nest higher and waits. The second time the crane stands beside her nest, she is not mourning. She is counting. Taehyun's smile faded by 1 degree. He could not say why. He did not know the song. He did not understand the words. But something about the way the drum was speaking under the strings made the back of his neck cold. He glanced at Kioma. She was sitting very still, her hands folded, the small wooden crane on her shoulder catching the chandelier light. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the door at the back of the ballroom, the large gold door through which the dignitaries usually entered. And her face was the face of a woman watching the horizon for a ship she has been waiting 25 years to see. The orchestra reached the second movement. The strings dropped out. The drum took over. Only the drum, low and steady, like a heart. 600 guests fell completely silent because they did not know what they were listening to and they did not want to be the first to speak. The chandeliers flickered. Then they went out. Not all of them. Just the central one, the largest one. The one directly above the head table where Taehyun was standing with his champagne still half raised. The light above him went black. The lights around the rest of the room stayed on, soft and gold. It was a small thing, a theatrical thing, the kind of thing only someone with control of the building's electrical systems could arrange, the kind of thing that could only be arranged by someone who owned the building. Taehyun looked up at the dark chandelier, and his face, for the first time in 12 years, did something. A small muscle twitched at the corner of his mouth. Mireille laughed nervously. "How dramatic," she said. "Did you plan this, darling?" He did not answer her. He was looking at his wife. Keoma had not moved. The wooden crane on her shoulder was still in the light. The chair where Taehyun was standing was now in shadow. It was 9:18 p.m. The gold door at the back of the ballroom opened. 2 men walked in. They were wearing identical cream suits. They were the same height. They had the same long, narrow walk. They had the same jaw. One had a small scar above his left eyebrow. The other did not, but anyone close enough could have seen, just barely visible above the collar of his shirt, a small birthmark shaped like a star on his left shoulder. The room turned to look at them. A young woman near the front gasped, not because she recognized them, but because she recognized the way every wealthy person in the room recognizes power when it walks into a room without being announced. Kyle and Kyan Jin walked across the marble floor of their father's ballroom for the first time in their 24 years of life. They did not look at their father. They walked straight to their mother. Kale reached the table first. He bent down. He kissed her once on the forehead, the way a son kisses a mother in a Yoruba house. Kyan reached the other side. He bent down. He kissed her once on the cheek, the way a son kisses a mother in a Korean house. Then they straightened up together. And they turned, at last, to look at the man at the head of the table. Taehyun did not understand at first. He saw 2 young men he did not know standing next to his wife. He saw the cream suits. He saw the matching faces. He registered somewhere in the back of his mind that the matching faces meant something, like twins. Twins were rare in Korea. Twins were a sign of something. But the connection did not finish forming because his brain refused to let it finish. He kept his champagne glass raised. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice was very smooth, very polite, the voice he used with people who had embarrassed themselves at his party. "I don't believe you were on the guest list. Perhaps the staff—" "We were on the guest list," Kyle said in perfect Korean, "under the company name Adeyemi Holdings. You confirmed the table yourself last week." Taehyun's face changed by 1 more degree. Adeyemi Holdings. He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Adeyemi Holdings had been buying Jin Group shares for years. His lawyers had brought it up 3 times. Each time the lawyers had said the same thing. We cannot trace the ultimate ownership. The company is structured through Lagos and Mauritius. The chairman is a young man named K. Adeyemi, who has never given an interview. The shares purchased are below the threshold for public disclosure. We are monitoring. Tae-hyun had stopped paying attention. He had assumed it was a quiet Nigerian sovereign fund. He had assumed it was harmless. He looked at the young man in front of him now, the tall, thin one with the scar, and he said slowly, "You are K. Adeyemi." "I am Kale Jin Adeyemi," the young man said, "chairman of Adeyemi Holdings, holder as of 9 p.m. tonight of 51.3% of Jin Group. The vote was finalized at midnight Singapore time, which was 11 p.m. here. The transfer was completed 33 minutes ago." The ballroom was completely silent. Tae-hyun lowered his champagne glass by 1 inch. "That is not possible," he said. "It is possible," Kayin said quietly, in Korean even softer than his brother's. "We have the documents, so do your lawyers. Mr. Park has been trying to call you for the last 26 minutes. Your phone is in your jacket. You may check." Tae-hyun did not check his phone. He looked at Mireille. Mireille's hand had fallen off his arm. She was looking at the twins, and her face, the smooth, beautiful, calculating face that had spent 6 years climbing toward this exact ballroom, was beginning to do something Tae-hyun had never seen it do before. The corners of her eyes were tight. Her lips were thin. She had recognized something the rest of the room had not yet recognized. She had recognized the family resemblance. She turned her head slowly toward Kioma. Kioma was sipping her water. "Tae-hyun," Mireille said, and her voice cracked very slightly on the second syllable. "Who are these boys?" He did not answer her. He could not answer her. Kyle reached into the inside pocket of his cream jacket. He took out a small object wrapped in a white cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, the way a priest unwraps a relic. He placed it on the head table, next to his father's untouched dinner plate. It was a small wooden crane. It was old, scratched, hand-carved. The right wing was slightly chipped where, 25 years ago, a young bride from Enugu had dropped it on the marble floor of her new house in Pyeongchang-dong during her first week as a Jin wife. Tae-hyun looked at the crane. He looked at his wife's shoulder. The crane there was identical, except slightly older, and missing the same chip in the same place. He looked at the crane on the plate. He looked at the twins. He understood. The understanding happened in his face the way a window cracks, slowly at first, then all at once. His champagne glass began to shake. He set it down because he could not hold it anymore. "No," he said, very quietly, almost to himself. "No, they died. The fire, they died. The fire—" "Aunt Jesu raised us," Kayin said, "in Busan, from the night of the fire that you arranged. She was very kind to us. She told us the truth when we were 16. She told us our mother was alive. She told us our mother was a great woman who had been lied to. She told us our father was a man who would call our mother worthless one day, and that when he did, we should be ready." Kale nodded. "We are ready," Kale said. He turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a voice that carried across the silent ballroom without ever rising, "my brother and I would like to introduce ourselves. I am Kale Jean Adeyemi, chairman of Adeyemi Holdings, and, as of this evening, controlling shareholder of Jin Group. My brother, Kayan Jin Adeyemi, is the owner of the Tide Logistics, which, as some of the older gentlemen in this room may have begun to notice over the last 6 months, now controls 3 of the 5 Incheon warehouses previously operated by the Black Crane organization. We invite all of you to continue enjoying the anniversary gala. The menu will not change. The champagne will not change. Only the name on the building will change, starting tonight. He bowed once to the room. 600 people bowed back automatically because that was what people did when a Chaebol heir bowed to them, and their bodies had recognized him as one before their minds had caught up. Tae-hyun sat down. His knees had given out. He sat down in the chair that had been moved 6 inches further from his wife's chair, and he stared at the small wooden crane on his plate, and he could not look up. Mireille moved before anyone could stop her. It was not a thought. It was an animal reaction. The reaction of a woman who had spent 4 years building a future and was watching it dissolve in front of 600 witnesses. She turned toward Keoma, and she swung her open hand at Keoma's face with the full weight of her shoulder behind it. She never reached her. Kyan's hand was around her wrist before her hand was halfway through its arc. He had not seemed to move. The room had not seen him move. One moment he was standing beside his mother. The next, his fingers were closed around the young woman's wrist in a grip so quiet and so absolute that Mireille made a small sound. Not pain, surprise. He held her there. He did not twist. He did not push. He simply held her arm in the exact position she had raised it, like a doll arranged by a careful child. He leaned forward slightly. He spoke to her in Korean so soft that only the people at the head table could hear him. "My mother's name," he said, "is Keoma Jin Adeyemi. You will use that name when you speak about her. You will use it tonight. You will use it tomorrow. You will use it for the rest of your life." He paused. "If you raise your hand at my mother one more time," he continued in the same gentle tone, "I will close the Incheon port routes that your father's hotel chain uses for its imported wine and its imported marble. You may ask him what that will mean for the Han Hotel Group. He will know he has been borrowing against those imports for 9 years. Mireille's face went white. "He will be sleeping under a bridge by next Friday," Koyan said softly. "Do you understand?" She nodded. Once quickly. He let go of her wrist. She sat down on the floor, not because she meant to, but because her legs had stopped working. A waiter rushed to help her up. She waved him away. She stayed on the floor. Keoma had not moved through any of this. She set down her water glass. She stood up. The whole room turned. She did not raise her voice. She had not raised her voice once in 25 years of marriage, and she did not raise it now. She spoke at her normal soft pitch, and the room leaned in to hear her, because nothing makes a room lean in like a woman who refuses to shout. "Tae-hyun," she said, "I would like to give you something." She opened her clutch. She took out the red lipstick. She unscrewed the bottom. She tipped it gently, and her wedding ring of 25 years slid out onto the white tablecloth between his hands. The diamond caught the light from the surrounding chandeliers, the ones he still controlled, the ones above the rest of the room. And the diamond looked, for a moment, like a small bright tear that had fallen out of the ceiling and landed there by mistake. "You gave me this," she said, "on a Tuesday in November, 25 years ago. You told me it meant I would never be alone again. You were correct. I have never been alone. I have had my grandmother's voice. I have had my work. And For the last 3 years, I have had my sons. She paused. You called me worthless tonight. In front of 600 people, I would like you to look at me now and say it again. She waited. Taehyun did not look up. His hands were flat on the table, on either side of the wooden crane and the diamond ring, and he was breathing very slowly, like a man trying not to drown. You cannot say it again, she said. I understand. I will not ask you to. But I would like you to remember, for the rest of your life, that the woman you called worthless tonight is the woman who now owns your company, your shipping routes, your mistress's father's hotel chain, and the building we are standing in. The deed transfer for the Jin Tower was finalized at 9 p.m. The lights on the floors above the 47th are already off. You may have noticed, or you may not have. You were busy with your toast. She picked up the small wooden crane from his plate. She placed it back into her clutch, beside the empty lipstick tube. The ring is yours, she said. The crane is mine. That was always the arrangement, even if you did not know it. She turned to her sons. Boys, she said, take me home. Chaebol offered her his left arm. Cain offered her his right arm. She put one hand on each son's sleeve. She did not look back at her husband. The three of them walked down the long marble floor of the ballroom together. 600 people stood up as they passed, not because anyone had told them to, because their bodies, again, had recognized something their minds could not yet name, that the small black woman who had been a decoration in this house for 25 years was, in fact, the queen of the building, and that her sons in the matching cream suits were the heirs, and that the man weeping quietly into his own plate at the head table was no longer the person who decided whose name was on the door. The gold door opened for them. They walked out. Behind them, very faintly, the orchestra began the second verse of Cranes Don't Mourn Twice. This time, the singer, a young Yoruba woman in a green dress whom no one had noticed entering, sang the words out loud. The crane does not mourn twice. The second time, she is counting. By 4 a.m, the lights of the Jin Tower had gone out one floor at a time. It was not dramatic. There was no announcement, no press release, no board meeting. Adeyemi Holdings simply turned off the floors it now owned, one by one, the way a careful owner walks through a new house, switching off the lights, left on by the previous tenant. Floor 61, floor 60, floor 59. Each floor going dark with a soft mechanical click that nobody on the street could hear. By dawn, the building was a single tall shadow against the gold light over the river. The three of them walked across the Han River Bridge. Kiyomo was in the middle, her cream coat thrown over the cream dress, her wooden crane pin still on her shoulder. Chaebol was on her left. Cayin was on her right. They were not in a hurry. They walked at the slow, steady pace of people who knew exactly where they were going and knew that no one was chasing them. The sun was beginning to come up behind them. It threw their 3 shadows long across the bridge, 3 identical lengths of shadow walking in the same rhythm. Cayin spoke first. Mother, he said in Korean, where do we go now? She thought about it. Lagos, she said. Just for 2 weeks. Your grandmother is 91. She's not seen either of you. I would like her to see you before she goes. And after that? Chaebol asked in English. After that, she said, we work. The Jin group will need a new chairman. I would like to suggest that the new chairman be Korean Nigerian. I have a candidate in mind. He is 24 years old. He has a scar above his left eyebrow. Kyle smiled. It was the first time he had smiled since the gala. I would like to suggest a vice chairman as well, she said. A young man with a star on his shoulder. He has been doing logistics. I think he could learn the rest. Kyan made a small sound that was almost a laugh. They reached the middle of the bridge. Keoma stopped. She turned and looked back at the city. The Jin Tower was almost entirely dark now. Only the very top floor was lit, the penthouse, Tae-hyun's office. The light there was a single weak rectangle in the dawn, and as the three of them watched, that light too went out. The tower was completely black. Keoma took a deep, slow breath. She put her hand inside her clutch. She felt the wooden crane. She felt the empty lipstick tube. She did not feel the ring, because the ring was no longer hers, and had not been hers for many years, even when it had been on her finger. She felt instead lighter than she had felt in 25 years. "Boys," she said softly, "your grandmother in Enugu used to tell me a story when I was small. She said, when a crane builds her second nest, the egg she lays in it is not for sorrow. It is for the morning. It is the morning egg. The world has to come and meet that egg, because the egg is not going anywhere." She turned to face them. "You are my morning eggs," she said. Neither of them spoke. She put one hand on Kyan's cheek. She put the other on Kale's. She kissed each of them on the forehead. First Kyin in the Yoruba way, then Kale in the Korean way. And the kisses were the same kisses she had given them once, 24 years ago, in a hospital room in Seoul, before the fire that had not killed them. She let her hands fall. She turned again to face the city. "Let's go home," she said. They began to walk. The sun came up fully behind them. The bridge stretched ahead in gold. The Jin Tower stood dark and silent at their backs. Somewhere on its 47th floor, a man who had called his wife worthless was sitting alone in the dark with a wedding ring on a tablecloth and a small chip on a wooden crane he no longer owned. And he was learning, for the first time in his life, what it felt like to be a decoration. In the lobby below him, the cleaning staff had already begun to take down the gold letters of the Jin name from the wall behind the reception desk. By Monday morning, the new letters would go up. Adeyemi Tower. In the south wing of the lobby, behind a column nobody ever noticed, a small wooden crane had been mounted on a brass plaque the night before. The plaque had no name on it, only a date. The date of an anniversary, ours in one line, in two languages, Yoruba and Korean. The crane does not mourn twice. The morning shift swept the marble around it without ever looking up. And far above the river, 3 figures in cream walked into the gold light, and the city of Seoul woke up, and the day that belonged to Keoma Jin Adeyemi and her 2 morning eggs began.